All right. Jumping into the world of CGMs today.
Ooh, CGM.
These continuous glucose monitor. Everybody's talking about them.
Yeah.
And, the big question we're going to tackle is, are the newer ones actually better?
Right.
Just because they say they're more accurate or they give you like a ton more data, is that what we really need
That's the
when
question.
it comes to managing diabetes, right? Like, do we need all the bells and whistles?
Yeah, yeah.
So to help us kind of unpack all of this, we've got some awesome blog posts from Diabetic.
Oh, yeah, Diabetic. They're great.
They really did a deep dive. And they were looking specifically at the Dexcom G7 and the Abbott Libre 2 Plus systems.
Okay.
So what are your initial thoughts? When you hear about these new systems, like what comes to mind?
Well, I always think it's so interesting, because the marketing is always like, bam, groundbreaking accuracy,
Revolutionary.
revolutionary data. But what does that actually mean for people, day to day?
Right, exactly. Living with it, using these things every single day.
Yeah.
Like, does it actually make a difference? Yeah. So let's break it down, starting with the Dexcom G7.
Okay.
That's the one everybody's been buzzing about, right?
Right.
They're all about the accuracy. Lower MARD. Have you heard of MARD?
Yeah, the mean absolute relative difference.
Yeah, all that jazz.
Yeah.
But the author pointed out from Diabetic that that number, it doesn't always reflect what's really going on.
Yeah, it's from those clinical trials,
Right.
which are very controlled. Your life and my life are not a clinical trial.
No, not at all.
So the author actually came up with something called the variance evaluation metric, so VEM.
VE. Okay, break that down for me and for everybody listening. What is this? What is VEM, and how does it help us understand accuracy in the real world?
It's like a way to measure how noisy your data is,
Wow.
how much your readings are jumping around.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So they did all this analysis and they found that the G7, yeah, sometimes it could be a bit more variable, but overall the difference between the G6 and the G7 wasn't that big.
Yeah. Interesting. So not as dramatic as Dexcom's marketing might suggest.
Yeah.
Okay. But here's the thing that's kind of throwing me off. A lot of people who switch to the G7 feel like it is more jumpy,
Yeah, that's the thing.
They feel like the readings are kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Why is there that disconnect, do you think,
Yeah.
between the VM analysis and what people are actually experiencing?
I think that's a great point, and it kind of highlights that this analysis, it was great, the data set they used, but it wasn't huge. We need more real-world data.
Yeah.
More people, more different types of people to really get the full picture.
Yeah, for sure. So if somebody is listening and thinking about, I got to upgrade to the G7 because of the accuracy, maybe pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Look at this VM data. Consider those anecdotal experiences that are out there. And think, it's a little extra accuracy on paper worth it.
Right, what matters most to you.
Yeah, exactly. What's actually going to make a difference in your life.
Yeah.
All right, and that kind of leads us perfectly into the Abbott Libre 2 Plus.
Okay, yeah.
This one's all about data, readings every minute instead of every 5 minutes, which sounds amazing at first.
Right.
But, the author raised this point. Could too much data, could that actually lead us to make bad decisions
Oh.
about our diabetes management? Like, are we going to overreact
Yeah.
to all those little ups and downs?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think that's a really interesting point. Like, more data, more problems.
Right. Is that the case?
Yeah.
I mean, the author was specifically worried about overcorrection,
Mhm.
taking too much insulin.
Right.
And she's like, oh my gosh, my blood sugar just went up a little bit.
Right, right.
Got to take more insulin.
Right.
And to test this theory, they did this really cool experiment. They ran 2 Android APS systems side by side.
Oh, wow.
One using data from the Libre 2 Plus,
Okay.
the other one using data from a Dexcom G6.
Interesting.
But both of them were set up the same way.
Okay.
Same settings, same algorithm. And they both had super microbolus adjustments allowed every 3 minutes. Now, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, what is super microbolus?
So super microbolus, it's this feature in some of these automated insulin delivery systems, right?
Yeah.
And it basically lets the system make these tiny frequent adjustments to your insulin based on your CGM readings.
Oh, okay.
So it's trying to keep you super steady.
Got it. So you get these 2 systems running side by side, one with the Libre 2 Plus data, one with the Dexcom G6. What happened?
Well, get this. The Libre system ended up delivering about 40% more insulin.
Ooh, that's a lot.
Yeah, than the Dexcom G6 system.
Oh my gosh. So more data, more insulin.
Yeah.
But is that good?
Yeah, I mean, the author thinks that it's because of all those frequent readings, Combined with those SMB adjustments, it was like overreactive.
Oh, like it was getting too much information too quickly.
Mhm.
And it just kept making these tiny little adjustments
Right, right.
instead of maybe like waiting a little bit longer and seeing the
Yeah.
bigger trend.
Eh,
Interesting. Okay, so more data
mm,
in this case might not be leading to like better blood sugar control. It could be
mhm.
causing problems.
Yeah.
Tell me, why is getting too much insulin a bad thing? Like what can actually happen?
Well, first of all, you can go low.
Yeah,
Low blood sugar, that can be dangerous,
definitely.
especially for people who don't feel those lows as strongly.
Right, right.
And even if you catch it early, it's disruptive. You have to treat it. It throws off your whole day. But even beyond that,
Mm.
long term, if you keep over-bolusing, it can make your diabetes harder to manage. Your body can become less sensitive to insulin.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about like a little inconvenience here.
Right.
This could have real implications for your health. So more data can be a double-edged sword. It's not inherently bad, but we have to be smart about how we use it. And that's what we're going to explore more in part 2. We're going to look at what the author recommends for like, how do we take all this data? How do we not get overwhelmed by it? And how do we actually use it to make good decisions?
Right, right.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we're back and still digging into this whole more data thing with the Libre 2 Plus. Before we left off, we were talking about that experiment, right? Where the Libre 2 Plus system delivered way more insulin compared to Dexcom. What else did the author find when they looked at everything?
One thing that really popped out was the size of the boluses, the insulin doses. Even though the Libre system gave more insulin overall, each individual bolus was actually smaller.
Interesting. So it wasn't like he was giving these huge, massive doses.
No, not at all. But they were happening way more often.
So it's not just the total amount of insulin, it's like the pattern of it.
Exactly. And the author thinks that all this constant tweaking, this up and down with the insulin, might not be as effective as giving fewer but slightly larger doses, based on a more stable trend.
Oh, I see. It's like trying to micromanage your blood sugar.
Right.
And you end up just making it more chaotic. I feel like this is where those smoothing algorithms could really come in handy.
Definitely. A good smoothing algorithm could help filter out some of that noise in the minute-by-minute data.
So it's not just blindly reacting to every single reading.
Exactly. It gives the system a clearer picture of what's really going on.
So we're not throwing out this frequent data.
Nope.
We're just finding ways to make it work for us.
Exactly.
Okay, so overcorrection, smoothing algorithms. The author also brought up another consequence of all this data crunching: battery life.
Oh, yeah. That's something people don't always think about. The author noticed a big difference in battery drain. Like, their phone battery died much faster when using Android APS with the Libre 2 Plus.
Makes sense. Your phone's working overtime to handle all those readings. That's definitely something to keep in mind, especially if you're relying on your phone for other stuff throughout the day.
Absolutely. And it makes you think about where CGM technology needs to go in the future. We need systems that can give us all this helpful data, but without killing our batteries so quickly.
For sure. So if someone's thinking, oh, I want that Libre 2 Plus because it gives me readings every minute, they might have to adjust their charging habit.
Yeah, maybe get a portable charger or something.
All right, so we've talked about some potential downsides of all this data, but is there ever a time when more frequent readings are, like, clearly a good thing?
That's a good question. I mean, the author didn't really address that specifically, but I can see some situations where it would be really helpful. For example, think about someone whose blood sugar tends to change really quickly.
Oh, yeah, those rapid swings.
Right. Having those minute-by-minute readings could help them catch those changes faster and maybe even prevent them from getting worse.
That makes a lot of sense, especially for people who are prone to lows. That extra data could give them more time to react.
Exactly. It could be the difference between catching a low early and having a really bad one. And it could also be really useful for people who are trying to figure out their insulin doses or like fine-tuning their whole diabetes plan. More data points give you a much clearer picture of how your body's responding to different things, like what happens when you eat certain foods or exercise or whatever.
It's having a more detailed map.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can see those little bumps and curves in the road and adjust your course accordingly.
So, same data can be helpful or harmful, depends how it's used.
I think that's a really important point, and it highlights why it's so crucial to work closely with your healthcare team. They can help you make sense of all this information and create a plan that's right for you.
Couldn't agree more. So we've explored both sides of this whole more data thing with Libre 2 Plus. We've seen the good, the bad, the in-between. But where does this leave us with the future of CGM technology? Can we have our cake and eat it too? Can we get the benefits of more without falling into those traps? That's what we'll be tackling in our final part. Stay tuned. Back again. We've really been digging into these new CGM systems, the Dexcom G7 and the Abbott Libre 2 Plus. All this talk about more accuracy, more data. I'm curious, have you kind of landed on one side or the other? Like, do you think more is always better, or?
It's a tough one, right? There are definitely some things to think about. Like, we've seen that more data can be tricky. It's not like it's automatically a bad thing, but it does come with, new challenges. I think for me, what's been most interesting is realizing how important it is to really pay attention to how we're using all this information.
Yeah, totally. It's not enough to just have all this data coming in. We have to actually understand it, know how to interpret it, how to use it to make decisions. So let's talk about what the author recommends, because they seem to be all about finding that balance.
Yeah, they're definitely not saying throw out your new CGM and go back to finger sticks.
Right.
But they are saying, let's be a little more thoughtful about this. Let's not just get swept up in all the hype.
So what are some of their concrete suggestions? Like, how do we find that sweet spot between having enough information but not being totally overwhelmed?
Well, one of the things they say is even if your CGM gives you readings every minute, like the Libre 2 Plus, you might want to stick with 5-minute intervals for those super microbolus adjustments.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're still getting the benefit of that extra data,
Yeah.
but you're not like reacting to every little blip.
Exactly. It's about being responsive, but not overdoing it.
And they also talk a lot about those smoothing algorithms.
Oh, yeah, those can be super helpful.
So instead of just reacting to each individual reading, you're looking at the overall trend, right?
Right. It's like filtering out the noise so you can see the signal more clearly.
I like that analogy. So it seems like those algorithms could really help prevent those overcorrections that we talked about earlier. Like if the system's not just going crazy with every little change, you're less likely to end up getting too much insulin.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance.
So we don't have to be slaves to all this data.
Nope, not at all.
We can use it to our advantage. Tweak those settings, find what works for us.
I think that's a really important message. Take control, be empowered. Don't be afraid to experiment and figure out what works best for you, because everyone's different.
And it's so cool to see how the diabetes community is really embracing that idea of empowerment. Like the hashtag We're Not Waiting movement. That's all about people taking control of their health data, working with developers, coming up with creative solutions.
It's really inspiring. And it makes me super optimistic about the future of diabetes tech. I think we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
Totally. And I think the key is going to be finding that balance, right, between all this cool innovation and making sure that it's actually safe and effective for people. Like, how do we give people valuable data without overwhelming them or causing unintended consequences?
Right, it's a delicate balance. And I think the author's final question really captures this perfectly. They ask, could there be a sweet spot where data frequency and algorithm sophistication strike the perfect balance between accuracy and safety? Is there that magic combination?
That's the million-dollar question, right? What do you think? Is there a sweet spot, and how do we find it?
I definitely think there is. But it's going to take a lot of work and collaboration. We need researchers, developers, healthcare providers, and most importantly, people with diabetes, all working together. We need to keep asking those tough questions, keep pushing for better solutions, and never stop advocating for ourselves. Because at the end of the day, this is about our health and our well-being.
Absolutely. And I think this deep dive has given us a lot to think about. We've seen that more isn't always better, that we need to be thoughtful about how we use all this data, and that we have the power to shape the future of diabetes tech. So keep learning, keep experimenting, and keep asking questions. And we'll be here with you every step of the way. Thanks for joining us.